Morning, everybody. Welcome to Talks with Terri. We're glad to have you all here this morning. And we are recording this session, and I am honored to have Councilwoman Daniela Abbott here and Councilwoman Linda Yuzafuja and CJ Opperthauser. How am I doing with your last name?
It's very close. I accept it.
Okay, I have one of those names too, so I get that. We are here this morning to talk about the ordinance that is going to be discussed further this evening in the Town Council workshop on green and complete streets. And with that, I'm going to let you guys talk about this further as you would like. Daniela?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Daniela Abbott, and yeah, just as a little bit of background, we at the town council level have discussed this as a group and with our town administrator, and improving roadway safety has been identified as one of our top priorities in Portsmouth. And so this whole green and complete streets process got kicked off last year. We had a series of accidents on East Main Road, like several accidents within a few weeks in the summer. And I introduced a resolution that kind of outlined that and requested two actions on the town's part: a road safety assessment for East Main Road for improvements we could make, and that we work on a draft complete green and complete streets ordinance for the town of Portsmouth. Now, what that ordinance does is it will set up a framework for us to identify safety improvements that takes into consideration all roadway users, including pedestrians and cyclists and people that need to ride public transportation, and prioritizes, our roads, and it gives us a framework for how to integrate complete streets into our, roadway paving and maintenance program. So we're in the process of preparing that draft ordinance now. Our town planner has prepared a draft that we've reviewed, and tonight at 7 p.m. we're having a public workshop to review the ordinance and kind of discuss ways to improve it, make it, stronger, and what the next steps are for how to incorporate it into our long-term plans and how to budget for it, frankly, because we might not be able to do all of it at once, but it's important to identify steps that we can do now that will have a meaningful impact on our roads in Portsmouth. I think the driving factors behind this effort is a lot of constituent input that I've gotten regarding the lack of sidewalks, the lack of bike paths. We don't have a single bus stop or a bus shelter, I think, in all of Portsmouth. Our main roads don't really even have shoulders. So we have, kids can't walk to schools, kids can't ride their bikes to school. It's hard to ride a bus, and there's just a lot of room for improvement. And I think this is an important first step to help us get there. So CJ from GrowSmart RI has been very helpful in this process. GrowSmart worked with the city of Central Falls, who I believe, and CJ, feel free to jump in and correct me, I believe is the only municipality in Rhode Island that currently has a complete streets ordinance in effect. There are other municipalities working on it. Newport is working on one right now. I think the long-term goal and vision for us would be for us to pass a green and complete streets ordinance next. And then, Newport will pass theirs. Hopefully we can get Middletown to join us, and we can have one, consistent policy across Aquidneck Island so that we can apply it to our roads in town. And now it doesn't apply to every single road in every single neighborhood. And there's, it's a process, but ideally we'd like to have some complete streets improvements applied to our state roads also, which go across town borders all the way, from Portsmouth through Middletown and Newport. Sidewalks, bike paths, shoulders, bus shelters. That's the complete streets element. There's also the green streets element, which is stormwater management, trees along roadways, and just in general making roads more environmentally friendly and pleasant to drive on. So I think that's kind of a really rough and dirty overview of what we're trying to do and what our goals are. So maybe I'll let CJ jump in and talk about it a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So like Danielle was saying, there's a lot of kind of specific problems in Portsmouth that this is hoping to address. And I want to comment a little bit on the state-owned roads component because there's a lot to talk about there. So first of all, I think it's worth noting that Rhode actually has a complete streets law that they passed in, I think, 2012, around about 2012, which basically says, the same thing that that this ordinance is going to say in Portsmouth, which is, we are going to, when we do new road projects, we're going to make sure that we're accommodating all road users, especially vulnerable road users like bicyclists, pedestrians, folks in wheelchairs, all that good stuff. And they've adhered to it sometimes. They're not, thus far, have not proven themselves great at sticking to their own complete streets law, which is really unfortunate, especially because we've actually seen an uptick in pedestrian crashes and bicyclist crashes this year. So this type of ordinance in Portsmouth would, really help potentially to hold Rhode's kind of feet to their own fire and make sure that they're just kind of following their own guidelines that they've set for themselves. So I'm really hoping that, that's something that will be an outcome of this ordinance, so that, even if the ordinance itself isn't trying to loop in state-owned roads, that it's at least kind of providing an opportunity to work better with Rhode to make sure that Rhode's going to, try to follow the Portsmouth bar of complete streetsiness on the roads that Rhode does take care of. So that's one thing that I think is worth noting. But yeah, in general, like Danielle was saying, there's a lot of room for improvement in Portsmouth. I think a lot of the room for improvement is actually on state-owned roads. I bussed down like a year ago to get coffee with Daniela, and I don't own a car, and I live in Providence. So I took the 60 down, and, I got off, we met at Sydney in Portsmouth, and I got off a bus stop, and it was immediately, road, grass, slope, off on the property at the bus stops, all of the bus stops, and there's no sidewalk, there's really no shoulder. So I was just kind of walking through like mud and grass for at least like a quarter mile to get to Sydney, and then the same on the way back. And it felt kind of just ridiculous on a road with, a lot of businesses, and I passed a school. I mean, it just felt sort of silly. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement on both local and state-owned roads, just to make, the experience for people like me, or, I'm lucky I don't have mobility challenges. If I did have mobility challenges, I don't know how I would have even gotten to Sydney. I really don't. Maybe I had to take an Uber or something way out of my way. But anyway, just making it, the components of complete streets that are really important are safe, comfortable, and convenient for everybody. And right now, I don't think that those three qualities are true of all the streets and roads in Portsmouth. So that's what we're hoping to change.
Can I ask you, CJ, how has RIDOT reacted to Central Falls? Has Central Falls seen this desired level of new engagement with RIDOT?
That's a fantastic question. So Central Falls passed their ordinance. I think it was enacted about a year and a half ago. I think it was like January of 2019, if my memory is correct. And the way that the ordinance works is it applies to any future road project. So any opportunity to apply some complete streets, principles of just making it accommodate, usually vulnerable road users a bit better. And to my knowledge, Central Falls hasn't had any major road projects that have kind of provided that opportunity. There is a Broad Street project that goes through Pawtucket, Central Falls, and part of Cumberland that is going to be really excellent. And you can kind of keep tabs on that through RIDOT's newsletter, actually. And that's going to be like a really amazing complete streets corridor. I was on the sort of like advisory team or whatever to kind of kick off that whole process. Grow Smart was, and John and I kind of split duties. So I think that their ordinance might help that project kind of stick to what the the desires were at the beginning, and that's being done right now. So I think that'll sort of, in a way, be the first test run of this ordinance. And Central Falls, I know a big concern for them. I mean, Central Falls has very low car ownership. I think it's the lowest car ownership in the state as far as municipality goes. I think it's like 20 or 25% of people don't own a car. In Providence, it's about 20. And not only that, but obviously Central Falls is teeny tiny. So it's easy to get from A to B in Central Falls without a car. And the last thing that's really important to them is they have had major road flooding issues in Central Falls. And so the green component is really important to them as well. So that, I think, is going to be addressed pretty immediately with the Broad Street project. They're going to add a lot of drainage and street trees and stuff like that. So I think that'll be our first test run, and that should hopefully be done, I think maybe by the winter, if I've been keeping tabs on the timeline. Okay, so I guess we'll see. How that turns out. Yeah.
And can I add something to what, I think to add to what CJ said, the green and complete streets ordinance in Central Falls, I think that, like you said, the green element of it and stormwater management aspect of it, that has spurred a lot of different stormwater management projects, not only in Central Falls, but Pawtucket has been partnering with them as well on some stormwater management projects, and also related to the Narragansett Bay Commission and their combined sewer outflows. And I think they have been able to command some funding to help manage their roadway flooding issues. So I think it'll be interesting actually to see what the ordinance in Portsmouth looks like, because we're sort of the polar opposite of Central Falls. We're extremely not walkable. We're very car dependent. We all own cars, but that still doesn't, kind of get us out of having to have some kind of infrastructure for people that either can't use cars or don't have a car or don't want to use a car. Because frankly, there's so many things here that are close by that would be pretty easy for families to ride their bike to, and we physically cannot do it because it's, not safe. It's terrifying. And on that note, also, my daughter started school this week on Monday at the middle school, which from my house, I don't even have to go on a main road. I can take all back roads to get there. So I take Stubtoe Lane, Middle Road, Union, and Jepson, which are 4 of our auxiliary arterial roads that have 1 lane each direction, 0 shoulder, and basically grass and drainage ditches on either side. And the number of kids I've seen who are kindergartners and first graders, because that's who's waiting for the bus after I drop my daughter off at the middle school, they're standing, on the grass next to a drainage ditch waiting for the bus. They don't even have, a 2-foot wide shoulder in which to stand safely and wait for the bus. I think those kinds of, really basic, safety and comfort improvements are where we need to start in Portsmouth. And, it's funny because I think having an outside perspective really changes how you look at things. But I grew up in a different country, but I spent my summers in the Midwest. And if you look at the roadway infrastructure and the pedestrian infrastructure and the bike infrastructure in the Midwest, it's mind-boggling that we haven't really made a concerted effort to try to incorporate at least some of those improvements in our roads here.
So
sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Linda, and then I'll have a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Well, just a few follow-up questions. One, could you talk a little bit about projects that have gone forward that do not meet the complete streets ethic, I guess, in Rhode Island that could have? Also, could you talk about some other places that have instituted complete streets and give an example of the improvements they've seen? And I guess third, could you try to pitch the benefits to my generation, which are older people who will have trouble with transportation and will not be able to drive very soon?
Right. I'm happy to answer all 3 of those the best I can. I'm going to actually talk about the third one first. A lot of the folks that we talk to about complete streets around the state are associated with or actually are organizations like AARP or Age Friendly RI. Those groups are extremely concerned about complete streets. In fact, AARP yesterday and today are doing an entire sort of online symposium about transportation, and basically it's all about complete streets. It's like, we know that, I mean, older adults and even children, like Danielle's kids, right? Like they can't usually drive. They may have mobility challenges. They may travel at different speeds than people like my age. And to not accommodate those folks in our communities is wrong. It's just wrong. If we know better and we can accommodate folks and allow them to, safely go grab a gallon of milk, or, just go for a walk and get some exercise. But I think especially just sort of the ability to either get to work or get to run errands or visit family. You should be able to do those things no matter what your mode of transportation is, or how quickly or easily you can move. So it's incredibly important. I think that's actually, like, if we built our streets for older adults, our streets would be safe, but we don't. We build them for cars, and we build them for people like me who can bike quickly or whatever. So I think we need to change that. I think your first question was, I think like probably Rhode projects that really didn't stick to the complete streets ordinance. And I'm definitely more aware of the projects that are happening on state-owned roads in Providence, because that's where I live and that's where I just sort of end up seeing the most. And just recently, they've come before our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee with a few projects that, I mean, one of them, for instance, was reopening the Gano Street exit off of 195, which is right down the street from me, actually. So there's a relatively new bike path, multi-use path that crosses where the light that you get to when you take that exit off of 195. And that path is used by joggers, bicyclists, folks with strollers, everything. And I actually use it to get groceries. So, and right now, that intersection doesn't even have a light for pedestrians. It's pretty unclear, like, when you can cross and how much time you have to cross. And they actually want to expand the exit, the off-ramp. And with, I think, pretty minimal and, maybe not even adequate improvements to that path, which, like, again, it's a bike path. Of all of the infrastructure to sort of conflict with an off-ramp, that's probably the most dangerous one, because you're going to have the most usage by bicyclists and pedestrians and vulnerable road users. So, now the effort is to try and convince RIDOT that they have to safely accommodate people that are using this brand new bike path, and that you shouldn't have to have a dangerous conflict with people who are zooming off of a literal freeway into a residential neighborhood. I mean, like, these kind of conflicts are avoidable with the right infrastructure, but, it's confusingly difficult to convince the powers that be that it's worth it to ensure safety for everybody. So that is the first one that comes to mind. And that is in progress. So, granted, maybe RIDOT will come around and hopefully they'll sort of put their money where their mouth is as far as pedestrian and bicyclist safety, because they do talk about that a lot. I know it's a concern of theirs, but we have to see the action meet the language that they put out there. And so I think your second question was about complete streets, policies in other cities and towns. The first thing that comes to mind that is pretty incredible is, and I know we do this too often, so I apologize, but Massachusetts. I think at least at Grossmore, we find ourselves bringing up Massachusetts all the time for best practices stuff. But the state basically has like an awards, like a incentive program for municipalities to enact complete streets policies. And what happens is the state says, okay, we have this money that we'll give to you to use toward complete streets projects. But in order to get this money, you have to enact a complete streets policy. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the amount of money is. And I think it can come in a few times and not just once. But either way, it has worked. And there's been a flood, absolute like avalanche of complete streets policies across Massachusetts so that, cities and towns can unlock this funding. And it's incredible, and it works. And so we're getting this, I think, with maybe just the sheer number and the desire to have those projects done. We're seeing a lot of there's a list every year of like the best complete streets policies of the year. And every year in the top 10, there's at least a few Massachusetts municipalities, because they're all gunning for this money. And it becomes, it's like an enhanced just kind of process to get this stuff done.
CJ, what was the mechanism that Massachusetts came up with that program? Was it legislative, or was it through their RIDOT, MassDOT, or whatever they call that?
That's a great question, and I don't remember the answer at the moment, but I think it might have been a partnership and some combination of the two. I think that it's definitely, I know that they're like MassDOT is definitely involved with that process, but I think it was spurred by legislation.
If you could find something out on that for me, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that I don't know the answer to your question. Yeah.
That's okay. So, which leads to my next question is, so we have these two East Main roads, since that's what we've been talking about, focusing on. We have these two projects in the tip scheduled for the 2020 cycle, say. They're divided into two, the same road. If we add these, we have the expectation of adding all these additional features, which I totally would love to have. So don't interpret my question. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate. What is the likelihood that we would end up postponing because there's not enough funding, or where does this extra funding typically come from to, maybe deal with landowners for easements? So, we need this, we have a lack of space for this infrastructure. That's one reason why we don't have it. So where does that funding come from? And would that be a possible trade-off that we might be sliding these? We've already seen these projects get delayed over the years, and now they're like within view. And,
sure, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a simple and complicated answer because, basically, I think we all know where the money can come from, right? It's gonna come from the tip, or it's gonna come from, or a combination of the tip and local, just kind of DPW oriented funding. But the reason that it's more possible than we think it is it's often, I think, especially frankly, and I'll get into the details in tonight's workshop with some visuals and such, but in a place like Portsmouth, it actually can be very cheap to accommodate and make these changes. Usually it's literally a matter of where you put paint down and what color the paint is. Because you have, the width of the road, and it's your choice of what to do with that width and what space to dedicate to whom and where to put the paint, how wide the lanes are, how many lanes there are. And by slimming down the lanes a little bit, you might be able to add a paved shoulder that can basically function as sort of a sidewalk. There are a lot of creative solutions to put down paint that and there are some roads in Portsmouth that don't have any paint on them at all, and it's just sort of like everybody figures it out. But by putting paint down very creatively, you can sort of designate the space on the sides are for bikes and pedestrians and folks in wheelchairs and whatever, and the space in the middle is for cars, and those cars have to negotiate with each other if they were to pass one another. And this is obviously for like a slower road, but there are all these sort of choices to be made with the money that you do have. That doesn't require really much of a budget. It's just a will to do it and kind of how your priorities are aligning. And as far as RIDOT goes, they obviously have a much bigger budget than any city or town in the state. And the same kind of goes for them. It gets more complicated, obviously, because we have to work with RIDOT to show them what we need and what we want. But, they're talking about doing the road diet on, I think it's East Main Road. And they could make a lot of changes on East Main Road that is just paint and signage and space dedication. I mean, even just slimming the lane down a foot is proven to slow cars down a bit. I mean, there's lots of solutions that require almost no more money than you have now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, add to that for a second. So I think we have like perfect examples here in Portsmouth, right? The northern part of East Main Road, north of Turnpike, all the way to Boyd's Lane, they repaved it, they repainted it, and they put in sidewalks. That was not a cheap project. They spent a buttload of money. Yet they did not add a shoulder. The sidewalk is often in many places too narrow for even a wheelchair to pass. They the mailboxes is a complete different issue, but they put mailboxes 3 inches from the road and they get knocked down by snow plows and they have to replace them every year. So, you know, it was an expensive project. They spent a buttload of money there, and there's some fundamental like design choices that were made that did not really adhere to complete streets. So that's an example of a project that was done. We had a ton of money for, we spent a ton of money for, and there were just poor design choices that were made because we didn't have this conversation, we didn't have the framework, and there was no like cohesive dialogue with Rhode about what our priorities are and what our objectives are. Now, for the southern portion of East Main Road, there, you're right, there are 2 different projects in the STIP. I'll talk about the first one first. The first one is the southern part of East Main Road to the town line, where they're supposed to repave it and they're supposed to put in sidewalks. Now, a separate project on the tip is a multi-use bike path along East Main Road, but there's no, those projects are separated in the STIP. They haven't been combined. There isn't a cohesive design process going on to try to optimize the design of the road to achieve all our objectives. And there's a lot of money associated with this project. So if they're going to, the money's already in the STIP, there's a lot of money at play. The design process has not started. And now is when we have to have that dialogue. Like, what should that road look like? Like CJ mentioned, the road diet, that's the other huge argument that we're having, right? Is like, how do we handle that road? And, you know, right now we're kind of weighing road diet or widening the road. And we really need to take a step back and like assess what our goals and priorities are and how we're going to achieve those. Because from, you know, as an elected official in Portsmouth and as a resident in Portsmouth, I don't think it benefits our community to have 2 high-speed 4-lane highways cutting through our town that are essentially parallel. That doesn't like optimize the usability and the the accessibility of our town. I think we need to, you know, look at what our users are, what are the priorities, how do we optimize and balance all these roads so that they kind of work together so that people can ride a bike if they want to ride a bike, they can walk if they want to walk, and all that. Now, the other project I'll mention very briefly that we do have in the STIP for East Main Road is from Turnpike to Town Hall, and that's a $15 million project that, according to the STIP, is, you know, includes roundabouts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that project has been on the books for over 10 years now, hasn't happened. The design of it is 15 years old now, and nobody's really addressing whether that's still what we want. How does that integrate with everything else? So, you know, I think that this complete streets ordinance is a great starting point for us to talk about our priorities, talk about how those projects can kind of come together to improve roadway safety and comfort in Portsmouth.
Yeah, I would say being the rep that represents a little bit of Middletown, that is, I think Portsmouth is a little bit up against Middletown, which is much more commercially developed, and they just redid their section of East Main Road, and it is more like that 4-lane highway, and that comes, so I think drivers tend to go that way because that's new, and they avoid West Main Road, which is even more congested than that, and they make that decision right at 2 Mile Corner. And then if we want them to slow down when they get to Portsmouth and we funnel them into 1 lane, I do think RIDOT's looking at the overall number of cars that come through, and Aquidneck Island sadly is like a pass through to get to the Cape in one direction, to get out to 138 and 195 in another direction. It's so that we are faced with that challenge, and we're going to have to figure out solutions for that too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's definitely a challenge. I think it's unfortunate that we didn't have better, coordination between the two municipalities. I think that really shows, a lack of, forward thinking and planning on the part of our communities to not work together. But Middletown and Portsmouth look very different along East Main Road. Like you said, Middletown, it's all commercial. They have grocery stores and BJ's and gas stations. Portsmouth, if you look at East Main Road, we have huge swaths of residential development. We have kids waiting for buses on East Main Road. We have UPS drivers and mail trucks making deliveries along East Main Road. It's just a completely different feel. And that's just due to the zoning and how things have developed over the last, the last several decades. And so what we're up against is that we've developed the majority of our residential neighborhoods to feed in and out of East Main Road. So that's our main, local
Artery.
transportation route. And for it to be used as a high-speed through highway is very problematic for those of us who live here.
Yes, I'm not disagreeing with you either. It's
Exactly.
Just we have two different, somehow we have to juggle that and figure that out. And I think that's going to be a challenge.
CJ, since we have our state rep here, could you outline maybe the couple Grow Smart Rhode Island legislative state priorities that you guys are working on?
Yeah, let me think. Well, we're working on our briefing book right now, which we put out every couple years, and so that's going to really have the substantive stuff. I can't off the top of my head. I don't know if I can narrow it down to two things, but we're working really hard right now. With with RIDOT and RIPTA. There's just a lot of challenges there right now. Obviously. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that question that well, but thank you for asking.
And yeah, the island with RIPTA, we're kind of an afterthought. If you look at the way the arteries, the RIPTA bus lines all converge on Providence, and we're just like little spindles hanging off their big star up in Providence.
Could I maybe ask another question then? I know that there's a transportation master plan being produced by it's
RIPTA.
locking up for the bus guys. And can you tell us where that is and how whether we can still influence it in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, there's actually a few huge transportation sort of plans and in the works at the state level. And one of them is the transportation master plan, the kind of transit forward RI plan that RIPTA has. And that is, mass transit focused. And it's pretty aspirational, which is very exciting. They certainly want to enhance the routes now that are very popular. Which actually include the 60 that runs from Providence to Newport. It's one of the best used routes in the state. And it's, I think it's the route that runs at least among the latest just in the day. I've taken it back from Newport at 11 PM or something like that, which is really, really excellent. So it's just kind of enhancing those types of routes. And so those plans are, I think they're kind of slowly they're getting ready to come out. At one point, we were hearing that plan, there's a bicycle mobility plan, which is, again, statewide. And this is really looking to basically create a full network of bike paths in the state and help municipalities also decide where they might put bike infrastructure. It's supposed to be just sort of a tool for municipalities with all this research and analytics that was done by statewide planning under the Department of Administration. These and some other plans actually were kind of trying to be bundled as a release so that they could sort of inform each other. And they still have not been released, which is really unfortunate. And for instance, the bicycle mobility plan has been basically done for over a year. But it has been, because it's been kind of bundled with these other plans, it hasn't really been fully released yet, which is disappointing and sort of frustrating. So I think my understanding is, some of the holdup is political. And I think I'm not sure what the exact solutions are, but I think it's like reaching out to, RIPTA leadership. Scott Avedisian is the guy in charge at RIPTA, and just kind of offering support and assistance and seeing what can be done. I think that's kind of where we're at. And I hate to say this, but I think part of the holdup is, is the kind of conflicts between RIPTA and Rhode that are going on at the moment. There was the proposal to merge the two along with the bridge authority, which I find personally very troubling. And now we're also kind of fielding this proposal to completely change, the bus hub in Providence and split it up, which as proposed is both not transparent, no public participation, and makes it frankly way more difficult for transit riders to transfer, especially if you're new to using RIPTA. We want to encourage people to try out RIPTA, and making it confusing is gonna, work against us. So I think my gut is that some of these conflicts and challenges are kind of hindering the release of some of these big projects as well. So I think that's part of it.
Do you have any ideas about what those draft reports would say about buses in Portsmouth and bicycle paths in Portsmouth?
That's a fantastic question. I would have to pull them up, but it certainly does have recommendations and plans for everywhere in the state, and of course Aquidneck Island. And two things that I believe are true of the whole island, including Portsmouth, is to, in the bike mobility plan would certainly be to have a path that somehow accommodates maybe over the, the Mount Hope Bridge, where you could like theoretically bike all the way from, Woonsocket basically to Newport. Because you can kind of get from Providence all the way up to the northern part of the state on bike paths, and you can get from Providence to Bristol on bike paths, but that's where it stops. And so I think like aspirationally, that's kind of one of the goals, is again, to create this full connected network. I mean, Rhode Island it's like, we were talking about Central Falls with the ordinance, right? Rhode Island is like the Central Falls of the US, right? Like, we're so small. What excuse do we have for not having a fully connected statewide bike network? We're easily, by far, the easiest state in the country to achieve that, and we haven't done it. New York State is actually closer to that than we are by a lot, and New York State is gigantic.
Yeah. So can I jump in for a moment?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Take back to the bike mobility plan, because I've actually been reviewing the bike mobility plan, and in addition to some other plans within the context of our efforts on East Main Road with Rhode and the road safety assessment that they did. The bike mobility plan for the state of Rhode Island prioritizes bike improvements for East Main Road and West Main Road, because we are a breakdown in the entire bike infrastructure network. Because if you look at the map of bike routes, like Portsmouth is a black hole where you can't get through anywhere. There's great places to go, but we have some like really bad bottlenecks in Portsmouth. Like, there's segments of East Main Road that are terrible, and there's no alternative route. So the bike mobility plan has identified those locations as key priorities to be able to kind of connect the whole network across the state of Rhode Island. Now, on that note, the town of Bristol is also working on a bike connector that is going to take the East Bay bike path from Independence Park all the way down to the Mount Hope Bridge and Roger Williams University, frankly. And I think that is a great opportunity for us to kind of build upon, is take that project and say, well, then, let's go further. Let's come down to Portsmouth next and try to really connect down all the way to Newport and the beaches. And I think for me, one of the frustrations that I've seen with us, because we have been working with RIDOT on some of these road improvements, is that they give great recommendations for how to improve the roadway for cars. But we have the bike mobility plan. We do have prior road safety assessments that were completed in Portsmouth. We have the Aquidneck Island transportation study. There's a wealth of planning documentation that was invested in, prepared, identifies, specific bike and roadway improvements for the town of Portsmouth. And they're 20 years old, 10 years old, and the majority of those improvements haven't happened yet. So we need to, enough. We know what the end goal is. We just need to pick some steps and just start making some progress on this, because I think we're the need and the demand and the magnitude of projects is so overwhelming, and we can't do it all at once, that we've kind of been handcuffed by the inability to do everything at once, that we haven't even been able to do the small stuff. And so I think that's an important thing to point out too, is that we're not going to be able to do it all right now. We don't have the funding to do all of it right now. The wish list is gigantic. There's so much room for improvement. What we just need to do is just to identify some stuff that we can do that will have a big impact. A couple of the big ones which are identified in the bike mobility plan, is a way to connect Turnpike with Middle Road, so you can get through that stretch of Portsmouth where it dips down and goes in front of Clements and everything, because that is impossible to bike. Only the most expert cyclist would even attempt to navigate that. Because again, there's no shoulder, cars are driving downhill very fast. There's no lights, and it's just very treacherous. So connecting that little segment. And then the other one that's identified is from Union to Sandy Point, because if you can get, Middle Road, Union, if you could get from Union to Sandy Point, then you could theoretically bike all the way down to the beaches, which, the accessibility and, appeal of that is pretty important. And one thing that we haven't really mentioned, but I know that CJ, you know about this, is the economic impacts of these kinds of improvements. It is a huge improvement in quality of life. For Aquidneck Island, our economy, well, actually the state economy, I would argue, depends a lot on our tourism dollars, and the appeal of outdoor recreation, especially in the time of COVID, is enormous right now. Can you imagine if we actually had a state-of-the-art awesome bike path that you could go from one end of Aquidneck Island to the other? That is a huge economic driver, and I think we understate the value of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in really quick and kind of enhance that thought, because Danielle is right. I mean, bike paths there's a report that I could be happy to share with you all, that we kind of made with a team called Paths to Progress here in Rhode Island. And Paths to Progress is a group of bike advocates and pedestrian advocates and people interested in transportation, looking to basically make the bike mobility plan a reality, make that kind of statewide network a reality. But we created a report, and it drew from a bunch of other reports that just overwhelmingly show how much economic power bike paths and off-road kind of trails can have. And you look at, I don't think you have to look much further than the East Bay bike path, because a couple years ago, when the state Main Street improvement funds were still available from Commerce RI, which, by the way, as far as legislative stuff, that's something we'd love to see come back. That's that's part of our briefing book.
What'd you call that? Say that again.
I think it's called the Rhode Island State Main Street Improvement Fund, something like that. It's from Commerce RI, and basically it would offer, grants for, I think you'd have to match it, but it was grants for local infrastructure improvements, usually on commercial districts or main streets or what have you. And I think it was a couple years ago, first it was $1 million, and it was reduced to $500,000, and they cut it completely. But a couple years ago, and it was still active, 3 communities along the East Bay bike path all submitted proposals that looked to just sort of draw people off the bike path and into their downtowns and main streets, and they were all awarded. I mean, that's what they chose to do with their money and with their chance at this money, is to just, make use of that bike path, and it with signage and infrastructure and improving the connections. So people know, municipalities know the power of bike paths right here in Rhode Island. But on top of bike paths, even just having more walkable, bikeable communities, there's a ton of economic benefits. And some of them are things that we don't even think about. I mean, here's a little one, right? Is you have fewer cars on the road. That's less times you have to fix the road up from potholes or repavings. You're saving people money if they don't have to use their car as much. They can make small trips to church or to, again, get a gallon of milk or whatever by foot or by bike. They're saving gas money. They're saving, money they have to spend on their car, and maybe they go spend it at the hardware store, or they spend it at the pet shop, or whatever. And I mean, it's also proven that people that walk and bike actually spend more locally over time than people that are driving. And you might think, well, if I have a car, I can, buy more stuff. I can go to the grocery store and buy, more bags of stuff and get home with those things. But people who walk and bike all the time, they frequent those places more frequently because it's easier for them and it's enjoyable and it's less of a chore. And so over time, it's, study after study shows that pedestrians and bicyclists just spend more locally. And you enhance property values with more walkability, the list goes on and on. And there's every reason in the world to make a community more walkable and bikeable. And one of them happens to be an entire plethora of economic benefits, I would say.
Is that program that you just spoke about, how they enhance Broadway in Newport?
I don't think so. I think that was a TIP project,
Okay.
but that is the type of stuff that you would see in, with that money. Yeah. And that, by the way, Broadway in Newport is just one of my favorite examples of a great complete street, a green and complete street in the state.
Right.
It's just so beautiful. And all of those gray bricks actually allow for rainwater filtration. Exactly. Yep. So everything on that stretch is just so well done, and it's much safer. It's much more inviting, and it's like you said, it's on a business corridor. It's basically like a little mini Main Street, and anecdotally, it seems like it's just far more well used than before that project was done.
Yeah, especially now with all the outdoor dining and.
Oh yeah.
It's great.
I wanted to mention something else that I think might be of interest to Linda in particular is you talked about all the complete streets policies in Massachusetts and how successful they've been. What kind of followed on the coattails of that was their MVP program, their municipal vulnerability program, which is the same as the MRP program that got started here in Rhode Island. It's their resilience building program. And I've seen a few really great projects in Massachusetts that combined the green and complete streets element with resilience funding to improve their downtowns, mitigate roadway flooding. And so they incorporated, sidewalk and bike path and roadway improvements with stormwater management to improve resilience, and it has a tremendous benefit. I can't remember the name of the town now, but there's a town in near around Worcester, I think, but a smaller town that did a whole downtown revitalization project that incorporated green and complete streets, resilience funding to kind of revitalize their downtown and reinvigorate the walkability of their downtown, which, like CJ was saying, boosts their businesses. And I know in Portsmouth, all these different bits and pieces kind of come together and they're all connected. Like we had a town center plan that never went anywhere. We have these roadway improvements that never went anywhere. We have, roads that aren't alternative user friendly. And I think if we kind of work on all those together, they really kind of come together very, very well. And I think from talking to constituents and families in Portsmouth, that is the kind of thing that we're really looking for here.
Good. I just participated yesterday on the Middletown municipal resiliency workshop. So there was a lot of discussion about a stormwater utility, which I'll bring back to you guys for another conversation. But
now we need the green bond to be on the ballot in November, though.
Well, I'm still hoping that bond, it's not going to be on the ballot. It's too late. That ship
we
has
missed
sailed.
the boat, right?
We did miss the boat, and sadly, and what I'm told is that it's going to be a mail ballot initiative in January.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way,
have we done that before?
Well, we've done the mail ballots now. We'll have 2 elections where the presidential
So it'll be a
preference
special
primary.
election.
Yes, yes, special
Okay.
election. Yes, there's there are constituencies that are unhappy about the money that we're going to spend there, but this was a leadership decision, and it'll happen in January. And I believe, I have heard that there's CARES Act money to fund that election. It's already been earmarked. It was maybe money that was going to be used in the primary that we just had that we didn't do mail balloting. So I think that money has already been set aside, and that's what will be used for the January election, is what my understanding is.
Just a quick addition to that too. The last two green bonds in Rhode Island had money set aside for basically for the bike mobility plan for installing bike paths. I think it was 10 million in 2016 and 5 million in 2018. And this one that might be 2021 and not 2020 has $0 for bike paths. And that group that I was talking about, Paths to Progress, that's been sort of at like the top of the list of things to try to make happen, and no success as of now. But that's a real missed opportunity there as far as connecting this statewide network.
That's disappointing, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to happen a little, too often, where we invest in stuff, there's great momentum, and then we kind of just drop it.
And my gut would be that if the bike mobility plan had already been released and has been kind of helping with some of that momentum, that maybe we wouldn't be in this spot that we are with having $0 for bike infrastructure. But
maybe those two decisions are connected. You
could
think?
be.
Yeah.
It could be.
That's true.
Sadly. Okay, so I think we're coming up on our 1 hour. Does anybody else have anything to add in closing comments? And this will be recorded, so if people missed it in the public, they can go back and view it. If they participate, I hope people participate this evening in the workshop. If not, if they hear about the workshop, they read about it in the paper, they can come back and watch this. This has, I think, been a very informative discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say if people do miss the workshop tonight and they view this or whatever and they want more information, I'm always super happy to talk about all this stuff. Zoom, email, phone. I'm happy to help if people are interested in outside of Portsmouth who are interested in trying to push for a complete streets policy in their town or city. I'm always happy to help with that. It's just it's a livability thing, and it's a quality of life thing that I think really every town and city deserves. And it's not one size fits all. It's going to, look a complete streets reality in Portsmouth is going to look very different from a complete streets reality in Central Falls. I think we all know that. And so it's, it's a beautiful thing that it's just a philosophy instilled in an ordinance where it's going to fit a community and its priorities as well as possible. So, I would say it's something that everyone should be looking at and talking about and thinking about. And I'm happy to help kind of push that along and provide resources as I can.
Well, thank you so much for joining on this morning, CJ.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Appreciate it. And Linda, Daniela, any other closing remarks?
No, I just want to say thank you to CJ as well for all his help through this process. He's been very helpful with his guidance.
I'm happy to do it.
Great.
Thank you, Terri, for organizing yet another Talks with Terri.
Terri and Donna. Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, thank you both.
All right. Well, we'll put this out there to the universe, and I hope other people watch it and gain value from it. So thank you all this morning.
Awesome.